ethically. My duty
Ethically?
is your...
I'm sorry. I must be hearing things. Did you actually just use the word ethically in a sentence?
In almost every discussion about Breaking Bad, it's a widely held view that Walter White is the ultimate villain, the embodiment of greed, pride, selfishness, and evil. Countless video essays on YouTube hammer home the idea that Walter's journey is one of moral decay, emphasizing just how bad he became. But here's the thing, they're totally wrong. The truth is, Walter's actions were not only understandable, but often fully morally justifiable, given the circumstances he found himself in. He didn't act out of malice or selfishness. Instead, nearly every choice he made had a logical, often necessary and morally justifiable reason behind it. The writers of Breaking Bad made sure that his decisions were grounded in relatable motivations, even when he was forced to confront life and death situations in a brutal criminal underworld. If there's one character who consistently caused people to suffer, it's actually Jesse Pinkman. Unlike Walter, who almost always carefully considered the consequences of his choices, Jesse often acted on impulse, driven by emotion rather than rationality. Jesse may seem like the innocent bystander, the likable screw-up who constantly gets in over his head, but in reality, his actions are far more reckless, selfish, and morally questionable than people give him credit for. In this video, I'm going to lay out a case that challenges the common narrative. The real fact of the matter is, everything Walter White did was morally defensible. Meanwhile, Jesse Pinkman, the supposed moral victim, is the true architect of almost all of the chaos and pain which occurs in Breaking Bad. Just to be clear, this video will be filled with spoilers for both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, so if you haven't finished either series, proceed with caution. Chapter 1. Manufacturing and selling drugs is not immoral. One of the core arguments against Walter White is that he manufactured and sold methamphetamine, which is a dangerous and illegal drug. But let's take a step back and think about this objectively. Is the act of selling drugs inherently immoral? I would argue, no. People are demanding meth, and Walt is simply meeting that demand. He isn't forcing anyone to buy or use the product. He's giving people exactly what they want. In fact, this is no different from countless legal industries that profit by selling products people willingly purchase, regardless of the harm they might cause to themselves. In economics, there's a concept called an externality. This refers to a cost or benefit which affects a third party who isn't directly involved in the original transaction. But when it comes to selling meth, there is no such negative externality. The people buying the drugs are the only ones affected by their decision. There's no third party suffering as a result of that voluntary transaction. Gale Boetticher, one of the most principled and logical characters in Breaking Bad, sums this up perfectly in Season 3, Episode 6, when he says,
I'm definitely a libertarian. Consenting adults want what they want. And if I'm not supplying it, they will get it somewhere else. At least with me, they're getting exactly what they pay for. No added toxins or adulterants.
Gale is absolutely right here. If people are willingly seeking out drugs, and if they're going to get them regardless of who supplies them, what moral responsibility does the supplier really have? As long as the product is exactly what they're paying for, the seller has upheld their end of the deal. There's nothing inherently wrong with producing and selling something people want. Doing drugs is a personal choice. The laws surrounding drugs, therefore, are unjust and immoral. They infringe on personal freedom. In the grand scheme of things, the world might be better off without people who are impulsive and self-destructive like drug addicts. In a counterintuitive way, allowing these people to use drugs freely could actually result in positive externalities by weeding out drug users from the gene pool, like when they accidentally overdose. If people die from doing drugs, that's actually a good thing. The reality is that the world will be better off without all of these impulsive and stupid drug users in the long run. Chapter 2. The concept of being in the game. One of the key concepts in both Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul is the idea of being in the game. This is best explained by Mike Ehrmantraut in Better Call Saul, Season 5, Episode 8, Bagman. When Jimmy reveals to Mike that he's told his wife, Kim, about his involvement in criminal operations, Mike simply responds,
"She knows. She's in the game now."
What?
What Mike means is that once you're involved in the criminal world, you accept the risks that come with it. Whether knowingly or unknowingly, once you step into that world, the rules change and the dangers become a part of life. The game is high risk, but it's also high reward, and anyone who enters it does so willingly, fully aware of the consequences. This is a crucial point when it comes to understanding Walter White's actions. The people Walt had to kill, those he confronted or fought against, were in the game. They weren't innocent bystanders or unwitting victims. They were players who knowingly entered the criminal underworld. They accepted the inherent risks involved, which includes the possibility of violence, betrayal, and even death. Just as in any high-stakes situation, whether legal or illegal, the risks come with the territory. In the criminal world, you have to expect violence and force as part of the business model. This is because criminal enterprises, by their very nature, cannot rely on the traditional legal system to enforce contracts or resolve disputes. When you're dealing in illegal goods, you can't simply call the police when someone wrongs you. You can't file a lawsuit if a deal goes bad or if someone threatens your operation. Because the state refuses to allow legitimate business to be conducted around drugs, these organizations are left to govern themselves, often through force and violence. Normally, the government holds a monopoly on the use of force. It enforces contracts, it settles disputes, and it provides the legal framework for business to operate smoothly. But when it comes to the drug trade, the government has essentially opted out by outlawing the very products being sold. As a result, the private market has had to take the government's place, and that includes employing the use of violent force when necessary. This is not a moral failing on the part of Walter or any other player in the game. It's a consequence of the government's decision to criminalize something that should be legal. Violence also becomes necessary for another reason: survival. In this game, revealing the nature of someone's criminal activities can get them locked up for life, or worse. The stakes are incredibly high, and keeping people quiet becomes a matter of life and death. In this environment, Walt wasn't being cold-blooded. He was adapting to the rules of a dangerous world created by unjust laws. The harsh penalties for drug-related crimes, combined with the government's refusal to allow a legal market, turned the game into a battlefield. The state created this system by criminalizing something that should be legal, and the consequences, the violence, the secrecy, and the betrayals, are the natural results of that unjust decision. Walter didn't write the rules of this world, he just played by them. And every person who worked in this world knew exactly what they were signing up for. Chapter 3. Every move Walt made was justified. Let's break down the major moments in Breaking Bad where people claim Walter White acted immorally. When you look closely at each situation, you'll see that every supposed immoral action Walt takes is actually fully justified. Let's start with the earliest controversial action. 1. Walt killing Crazy 8. Now, while this might not be something many people find particularly immoral, there are still those who think Walt crossed a line here. The reality is, Walt had no choice. Crazy 8 was planning to kill Walt, and when Walt learned of this, it became a clear-cut case of self-defense. Faced with the choice between being killed or killing his would-be murderer, Walt did what anyone in that situation would do. He acted to save his own life. There's no moral ambiguity here. Walt was fully justified in killing Crazy 8. 2. Walt letting Jane die. Now, this is where opinions start to get more divided, but I'll be the first to say, Walt letting Jane die was entirely justified. By not intervening as she overdosed, Walt saved the person he cared about most, Jesse. Jane was clearly leading Jesse down a path of destruction, getting him deeper into heroin addiction and dragging him into an even worse spiral. Not only was this in Jesse's best interest, but Jane had also threatened Walt's family by blackmailing him for the drug money. She was dangerous and manipulative. Frankly, she had this coming. Let's be real. Jane wasn't exactly adding a lot of value to the world. She was a junkie tattoo artist who was about to destroy Jesse's life. And Walt's decision not to intervene was a form of self-defense for both himself and Jesse. 3. The airplane crash. The infamous mid-air collision of the two airliners is one of the most unexpected plot points of Breaking Bad. But can Walt really be blamed for this? Absolutely not. Walt had no way of knowing that allowing Jane to die would set off a chain of events leading to an air traffic controller, Donald Margolis, Jane's father, making a catastrophic error at work. The crash was a freak accident, and there's no reasonable way Walt could have foreseen such an extreme and outlandish consequence. To hold him responsible for this would be absurd. If anyone deserves some blame from the main cast, it's Jesse. He got Jane hooked on hard drugs after she'd been sober for a long time, which played a huge role in her downfall. But even then, the ultimate responsibility lies with Donald Margolis himself. He shouldn't have returned to work as an air traffic controller while he was still overwhelmed by grief. His inability to judge his emotional state led to the accident. 99% of the fault lies with him, not with Walt nor Jesse. 4. Walt getting Jesse to kill Gale. Finally, there's the controversial moment in which Walt orders Jesse to kill Gale. Many people argue that this is proof of Walt's moral decay, but they're wrong. Walt was planning to kill Gale himself. The only reason Jesse had to do it was that Mike was about to kill Walt. This was a life-or-death situation, and Walt's hand was forced. He was in a situation where he had to make a difficult decision to save his own life. It's important to remember that Jesse owed Walt. Walt had already killed the two gangbangers to save Jesse, and they were only in that predicament in the first place because Jesse had recklessly gone after them. Let's not forget Gale was in the game. He willingly entered the criminal world, which meant he accepted the risks that came with it. Gus Fring, who orchestrated this situation by trying to replace Walt with Gale, is more to blame than anyone. If Gus hadn't been so quick to resort to violence as a solution to his business problems, none of this would have been necessary. Walt was simply protecting himself from Gustavo's overreaction. If Gus had been more open-minded, he would have seen that Walt's actions were motivated by his deep care for Jesse. Instead of viewing Walt as a loose cannon, Gus could have understood that Walt wasn't a liability, but someone who was simply trying to protect those he cared about. Walt's motivations were mostly reasonable and rooted in loyalty and survival. Also, Walt was totally willing to continue working for Gus, as if nothing had happened. But Gus's lack of psychological insight led him to always default to murder as the solution, and he totally underestimated Walt. 5. Walt poisoning Brock.
I am sorry about Brock, but he's alive, isn't he? He's fine, just as I planned it. Don't you think I knew exactly how much to give him? That I had it all measured out? Come on! Don't you know me by now?
The decision to poison Brock might seem extreme at first glance, but when you break it down, Walt's choice was entirely justified. First and foremost, Brock wasn't harmed in the long run, and neither was Jesse. The lily-of-the-valley poison Walt used was non-lethal and temporary. On the other hand, if Walt hadn't acted to get Jesse on his side, there was a very real chance that Hank, and possibly Walt's entire family, would have been killed by Gus. In this case, poisoning Brock was the lesser of two evils and a necessary move to ensure that Jesse would be on Walt's side. Not poisoning Brock would have led to catastrophic outcomes for many innocent people. When we talk about the value of human life, we can't ignore the fact that Brock, while a child, isn't the most valuable person in the world. His future, given his surroundings and upbringing, doesn't exactly look promising. His mother is a drug addict, and there's a good chance Brock himself will follow a similar path. It's harsh, but realistic. Brock's potential contribution to the world is minimal compared to what Walt already had accomplished and could still have achieved from that point onward. Walt and his family hold far greater value to society than any poor Mexican kid ever could. Brock is very likely to grow up to be a dumb, poor drug user, just like his mother, or maybe even a gangbanger like his uncle. These traits are likely to be deeply embedded in his genetics. He shouldn't be thought of as having extremely high moral value just because he's a child. Also, Jesse's obsessive concern for Brock, a child that isn't even his, exposes just how misguided his values are. His fixation on protecting and caring for Brock, while admirable on the surface, reveals a deeper flaw. He's putting immense energy into raising another man's offspring. Jesse is literally a cuckold. 6. Walt killing Gus. Gus Fring's death is one of the most iconic moments in Breaking Bad, and it's another case where Walt's actions were fully justified. After Gale's death, Gus immediately escalated the situation, targeting Walt and even threatening his family. If Gus had taken a moment to reflect, he could have seen that Walt wasn't a liability. He was just fiercely protective of Jesse. But instead, Gus acted like a cold, ruthless, impulsive animal, making the situation far more dangerous than it needed to be. When Gus threatened Walt's family, Walt had no choice but to eliminate him. Some critics point to the fact that Walt set off a bomb in a nursing home, but let's be real. Walt knew exactly what he was doing. He's a scientific genius, and he made sure there would be no collateral damage. The explosion was incredibly precise, killing only Gus, Tyrus, and Hector. And even if there had been some casualties among the elderly residents, that wouldn't have been the worst thing. These were extremely old people, close to death anyway. If you really think about it, Walt may have actually saved Hank's life by entering into the drug business in the first place. Hank was bound to sniff around Gus's operation sooner or later, given his role in the DEA. And knowing Gus's ruthlessness, Hank would have been eliminated before he could pose a serious threat. Walt's involvement and his eventual killing of Gus likely saved Hank from meeting a violent end at the hands of Gustavo's operation. 7. Walt hiring the prison gang to kill Gus's ex-henchmen. Walt's decision to hire the prison gang to kill Gus's former henchmen is another situation where he was entirely justified. These men were in the game. They knew what they signed up for, and they posed a direct threat to Walt's operation. In the world of drug cartels and criminal organizations, these types of killings are simply part of the business. These men were soldiers in a war, and unfortunately for them, they lost. Walt didn't act out of malice. He acted out of necessity to protect himself, his family, and his empire. 8. Walt extorting Gretchen and Elliot. Finally, we come to Walt's extortion of Gretchen and Elliot. Some might argue that scaring them into laundering his money was cruel, but in reality, it was the only way to ensure that his family would receive the money he worked so hard to earn. Walt didn't even hurt them. He simply played on their fear by bluffing with the threat of hitmen. Given the stakes, this was a small price for Gretchen and Elliot to pay. And let's not forget, Gretchen and Elliot had this coming. In their televised interview with Charlie Rose, they downplayed Walt's contribution to their company, stating that Walt only contributed the company name. This was a blatant lie and a complete dismissal of Walt's integral role in their success. They built their wealth on the foundation of Walt's scientific ideas, and no matter what Walt did later, they still owed him respect for that. Extorting them wasn't just about securing his family's future, it was about holding them accountable for their dishonorable behavior. Walt's actions, while extreme, were always driven by necessity, survival, or the protection of his loved ones. In each of these moments, Walt made tough decisions in impossible situations. And when you look at them from a logical perspective, every single one of them is justified. Chapter 4. Walt's positive character traits. Walt's many positive character traits and actions are often totally overlooked, misinterpreted, or denigrated. These actions and traits reveal the strength of his character. Critics conveniently ignore the many instances where Walt proves himself to be honorable, self-sacrificing, and deeply loyal. Let's go through a bunch of them, one by one. 1. Walt said no to Gretchen and Elliot when they offered to pay for his cancer treatment. Firstly, one of the first clear signs of Walt's moral integrity comes when he refuses to let Gretchen and Elliot pay for his cancer treatment. Contrary to popular opinion, This was a selfless, honorable choice. Walt didn't want to be a parasite, feeding off the success of others. Instead, he chose to take matters into his own hands, refusing to be a burden on anyone, even if it meant risking his life. This decision shows Walt's deep desire to be a net benefit to society. He wanted to live off the sweat of his own brow, not by taking from others. In a world where so many people would gladly accept charity, Walt's rejection of it highlights his strong sense of honor and independence. 2. Walt never betrayed Skylar, unlike how she betrayed him. Marriage is a sacred institution, but it's clear that Skylar didn't see it that way. When she discovered Walt was involved in the drug trade, her immediate reaction was to cheat on him. That was a huge betrayal, and yet despite the emotional pain it caused, Walt never succumbed to the temptation of infidelity. Even when he became immensely wealthy, he remained loyal to Skylar and didn't indulge in the lifestyle of bedding numerous women as many men in his position might. This is a testament to Walt's strong moral compass. He held on to the value of marriage, even when his wife didn't. 3. Walt's loyalty to Jesse was unwavering. Throughout the series, Walt's loyalty to Jesse is one of his defining traits. He cared for Jesse like a son, and never even entertained the thought that Jesse could betray him by becoming a police informant. Walt followed the criminal code, which states that you should never rat on your friends. But Jesse didn't live up to this code. When Jesse ultimately turns on Walt, it's one of the most heartbreaking moments of the series. But up until that moment, Walt's unwavering loyalty shows that he valued friendship and honor far more than Jesse ever did. 4. Walt was willing to turn himself in after Hank found out. When Hank finally uncovered the truth about Walt's drug empire, Walt didn't deny responsibility or try to fight it. Instead, he showed tremendous honor by being willing to turn himself in and let Skylar decide his fate.
And I ain't made a deal. Skylar, I'll make this easy. I'll give myself up if you promise me one thing. You keep the money. Never speak of it. Never give it up.
This moment highlights how much respect Walt had for his wife, even after all they had been through. He took full responsibility for his actions, demonstrating his willingness to face the consequences of his choices.
No, don't talk. It was me. I screwed up.
What's even more telling is that Skylar ultimately sided with Walt, recognizing that despite everything, he wasn't a monster. She knew that deep down, Walt was still a good man, which is why she ultimately chose to stick with him. 5. Walt refused to let Hank be killed, even if it meant losing everything. One of Walt's most profound moral acts comes during the intense standoff where Hank's life is on the line. Even when it meant giving up everything he had worked for, his money, his empire, Walt was willing to do so just to save Hank. This act speaks volumes about Walt's dedication to his family. He would rather sacrifice his entire fortune than let Hank die. And let's not forget, Hank was actively trying to take Walt down at this point. Yet Walt still refused to let him be killed. The rage Walt felt toward Jesse after Hank got killed anyway was completely justified. Jesse's betrayal had just gotten a member of Walt's family killed, and Walt had every right to feel furious about it. 6. Walt took the blame to protect Skylar. In one of the most self-sacrificing moments of the entire series, Walt willingly took the blame for everything so Skylar wouldn't have to. Like Batman in The Dark Knight, Walt became the villain in the eyes of the world, allowing Skylar to shift the blame entirely onto him. This was an act of profound love and loyalty. When Walt made that phone call, fully aware that the police were listening, he crafted his words carefully to make it seem like Skylar was innocent, shielding her from any responsibility. Walt was willing to be the monster if it meant his family could be safe. 7. Walt entered the criminal world to provide for his family. Walt was motivated by a desire to leave behind something substantial for the people he loved. Even with everything that went wrong along the way, Walt succeeded in this goal. Thanks to his efforts, his family is set to receive millions of dollars, ensuring their financial future. As Gus Fring once said,
"And a man provides. And he does it even when he's not appreciated, or respected, or even loved. He simply bears up, and he does it because he's a man."
This quote encapsulates Walt's journey. He ultimately bore the burden of his actions, not just for glory, but at least partially out of a sense of responsibility to his family. Walt's actions throughout Breaking Bad may have been extreme, but his moral qualities are undeniable. He made many decisions that protected the people he cared about and upheld his principles, even when the world seemed set against him. To dismiss Walt as purely evil is to overlook the many ways in which he acted with honor and integrity, often at great personal cost. Chapter 5. Jesse was the real villain. As much as people love to view Jesse Pinkman as the victim in Breaking Bad, the truth is that he was almost fully responsible for so much of the suffering and chaos throughout the series. While Walt is often blamed for things falling apart, it's actually Jesse's reckless, prideful, and impulsive actions that set the stage for disaster. In many ways, Mike's iconic rant in Season 4, in which he lashes out at Walt for his ego and pride, applies far more accurately to Jesse. "All of this, falling apart like this, is on you. We had a good thing, you stupid son of a bitch. We had Fring, we had a lab, we had everything we needed, and it all ran like clockwork. You could have shut your mouth, cooked, and made as much money as you ever needed. It was perfect. But no, you just had to blow it up. You and your pride and your ego. You just had to be the man. If you'd done your job, known your place, we'd all be fine right now." Mike may have directed these words at Walt, but think about it. Wasn't it really Jesse who started the process that led to everything falling apart with Gus? If Jesse had kept his head down and done his job, if he hadn't let his pride and ego drive him into reckless decisions, everything would have been fine. Walt wouldn't have had to take so many drastic measures if Jesse hadn't continuously forced his hand. Much of what Mike said about Walt blowing it all up, out of pride and ego, actually applies far more to Jesse. Even Mike saw it in the earlier seasons. He wanted to eliminate Jesse because of how much trouble he was causing.
You got a good thing going here, we all do. You want to risk it all on one junkie? Now, I realize you two have a history, but this kid's been on the bubble a while now. It's a long time coming.
Jesse's pride and ego were his downfall. Who was constantly complaining about their salary while making over $1 million? Not Walt. Jesse.
All right, 96 million. 96 to our 3. That is messed up, yo.
Who decided to steal meth from Gus to sell on his own, putting the entire operation at risk? Not Walt. Jesse.
The yield.
201.8.
The truth is, Jesse had way more pride and ego issues than Walt ever did. He couldn't handle being beneath someone in a hierarchy and felt the need to rebel, even when it wasn't in his best interest. Walt, on the other hand, understood the game and accepted his place in the structure, at least until it became a life or death situation. Jesse's character flaws mainly stemmed from his prideful, emotionally impulsive, and negligent approach to criminal life. Now let's break down 4 big actions Jesse takes that showcase his flawed character and how his actions forced Walt into extreme measures to clean up his mess. 1. Jesse enabling Jane's relapse. Jesse was the one who enabled Jane to relapse into heroin addiction after she had been sober for a long time. Not only did this destroy Jane's life, but it also set Jesse on a downward spiral. The influx of cash from the meth operation only fueled their addiction, and it could have easily ended with both of them overdosing. Jesse had no excuse for enabling Jane, and this reckless behavior set the stage for her eventual death. He didn't consider the consequences of his actions, and his negligence nearly destroyed both of their lives. 2. When Jesse threatened to sue Hank. Out of pure ego, Jesse took it upon himself to threaten Walt's family after Hank beat Jesse up. Jesse's response was to seek petty revenge by threatening to sue Hank, putting immense pressure on Walt and dragging him into even deeper trouble. This choice had no calculated rational or moral justification. It was entirely driven by Jesse's wounded pride. By threatening Walt's family, Jesse showed a complete lack of consideration for the risks and pressure he was putting on them. This selfish decision forced Walt to bring Jesse into Gustavo's meth operation as his 50-50 partner, escalating the stakes for everyone involved, especially since Jesse was so obviously ill-equipped and underqualified for such a position. 3. Jesse deciding to kill Gustavo's dealers. Jesse's most reckless decision was choosing to plan an assassination of 2 of Gus's low-level dealers in revenge for the death of his friend Combo. Jesse was working for Gus at the time, and he decided to personally murder Gus's employees, completely disregarding the consequences. This was not only incredibly dangerous, but also incredibly stupid. Jesse didn't think through what it would mean to kill people who worked for a terrifying drug kingpin. He was driven purely by pride and revenge.
And your pride and your ego.
Refusing to see that the drug trade is a war, and Combo's death wasn't personal. It was just business. Jesse's impulsive actions here put everyone's lives in danger, including Walt's. The actions he took here ultimately did cause a massive spiraling effect, being the root source cause of many people's deaths afterwards. 4. Jesse betraying Walt and ratting on him. Jesse's final betrayal was the most unforgivable. He poured gasoline all over Walt's house, planning to burn it down, and then ratted Walt out to the DEA. He even called Walt and threatened to,
"Next time I'm gonna get you where you really live."
At this point, Jesse showed a total disregard for the consequences of his actions. He was willing to burn down Walt's home, knowing that Walt's family, Flynn, Holly, and Skylar, could be hurt or killed in the process. Jesse didn't care about the innocent people who would suffer because of his actions, and his betrayal led directly to Hank's death and Walt's downfall. Walt's true character flaw was caring too much about Jesse. If there's one big actual flaw in Walter White, I will concede it's his irrational and almost obsessive need to protect Jesse. This isn't just a one-time occurrence or an isolated moment of kindness. It's a recurring, defining trait that, ironically, becomes Walt's biggest downfall. Time and time again, Walt lets Jesse drag them both down because he cares about him too much. Jesse becomes like a son to him, and that deep emotional bond clouds Walt's judgment, forcing him to take extreme actions to clean up Jesse's mistakes, often hurting many innocent people in the process. Walt's decisions to protect Jesse aren't always logical or planned. They are driven by passion, by an emotional connection that pushes him to impulsively risk everything to save Jesse. When it comes down to the wire, Walt's protective instincts for Jesse kick in without much thought, and he acts purely out of his need to keep Jesse safe, even if it means putting himself, his family, or others in danger in the long run. In that sense, Walt's care for Jesse can be seen as a moral flaw. The destruction that follows in their wake stems largely from Walt's inability to let Jesse face the consequences of his own negligent actions. And yet many fans and YouTube analysts see Walt's loyalty to Jesse as one of his few redeeming qualities. They think his protectiveness makes him more sympathetic or even heroic. But the truth is, Walt caring for Jesse to such an extreme degree is a moral failing. Jesse's life simply wasn't worth the lives and destruction it costs. Time and again, Jesse is in danger because of his own irresponsibility, yet Walt sacrifices everything to save him. In reality, Jesse deserved to face the consequences of his actions, but Walt's protective instincts prevented that from happening, leading to even greater harm. Walt struggled to handle Jesse's emotional instability. It's important to note that while Walt cares deeply for Jesse, he initially fails to understand how to deal with Jesse's emotional instability. Early on, Walt's blunt honesty, calling Jesse an idiot, yelling at him, and not handling him with the necessary sensitivity, pushes Jesse further away. Jesse's ego is fragile, and Walt's harshness only makes things worse. In this regard, Walt's failure to communicate effectively with Jesse adds to the growing tension between them. However, by the end of season 4, everything clicks, and Walt learns how to manage Jesse's emotions. He becomes more calculated and cold, understanding that manipulating Jesse for the greater good is sometimes necessary to prevent further damage. There's nothing immoral about this approach. It's a survival tactic. Walt becomes the counterbalance to Jesse's impulsive, emotionally driven decisions, and in doing so, he keeps Jesse from causing even more destruction. Walt's decision to kill Jesse was justified. One of the most discussed choices Walt makes in Breaking Bad is his decision to kill Jesse in Season 5B. Many viewers see this as a moment in which Walter acts truly evil, but in reality, Walt is breaking away from one of the only moral failings he has. Walt had spent the entire series cleaning up after Jesse, protecting him from himself, and at this point, Jesse had become an unstoppable force of chaos, threatening to destroy everything Walt had worked for. The smarter, and even more morally righteous thing to do would have been to kill Jesse long before this point, like right after he got beat up by Hank, as opposed to forcing Gus to hire him instead. Or, how about when Jesse comes up with his dumbass plan to kill Gustavo's employees? Allow Gus to kill Jesse then. Or, how about when Jesse decides to get into a gunfight with two gangbangers, don't commit vehicular homicide just to save him? Or, how about when Jesse starts being an idiot and throwing all of his money out his car window, risking everything for you? Hire someone to kill him then. Or, how about set up a plan to kill Jesse after he's poured gasoline all over your house? Nope, just meet him in a public place to hash things out with him after that. As close friends, yes, that totally makes sense and will work for sure, because that's totally normal. Walt only decides to kill Jesse after it's clear he cannot be reasoned with, and it's extremely clear he's trying to ruin everything Walt has worked for. Walt was way more than justified in killing Jesse at this point. For no good reason at all, Breaking Bad analyzers have an unjustifiably sympathetic view of Jesse. Walt's decision to kill Jesse wasn't impulsive, nor born out of malice. It was a calculated and justified move. From Walt's perspective, Jesse had already poured gasoline all over his house, threatened his family, and was clearly on a mission to ruin everything Walt had built. Walt didn't rush to kill Jesse at all. In fact, he tried to reason with him multiple times. Only when it became clear that Jesse could no longer be reasoned with did Walt decide that killing him was the only option left.
Open your eyes! Can't you see that I needed you on my side to kill Gus? I ran over those gangbangers. I killed Emilio and Crazy 8Y. I did all of those things to try to save your life as much as mine. Only you're too stupid to know it.
Jesse isn't a martyr, Walter is. There's a common narrative among Breaking Bad fans that Jesse is like a martyr, suffering for Walter's sins, but I think it's actually the other way around. Jesse caused most of the destruction through his negligent and impulsive, egotistical actions, and yet Walt constantly forgave him, protected him, and even ultimately sacrificed himself for Jesse. When Walt rescues Jesse from Jack's gang's compound in the final episode, just like Jesus, Walt dies for Jesse's sins. Jesse deserved a much harsher fate for everything he did. But despite being betrayed and almost ruined by Jesse, Walt still impulsively forgave him in the end. Walt's final act of freeing Jesse from captivity wasn't about redemption for himself. It was about giving Jesse one last chance to live. Ultimately, Jesse Pinkman wasn't the victim everyone makes him out to be. He was the real villain of the series. His reckless actions often set off big chains of events that led to countless deaths, all because he couldn't control his pride and impulsiveness. Walt's biggest flaw was caring too much about Jesse, allowing his love for him to totally cloud his judgment. Chapter 6: The Few Exceptions. Even Walter White, with all of his justifiable decisions, did have a few other small moments which are harder for me to defend. I'll admit that I was using a bit of hyperbole for this video's title, because Walt is guilty of making a few small mistakes. These instances don't define him as evil, but they do show that he was a bit fallible. In most of these cases, however, we can find some level of justification, even if these particular actions were wrong overall. 1. Stealing the barrel of methylamine and the train heist. Let's start with one of the most obvious examples: theft. Stealing is almost always immoral, and in both of these cases, stealing the methylamine barrel early on and later in the elaborate train heist, Walt crosses a moral line. These companies weren't part of the criminal world. They weren't in the game, and so stealing from them wasn't justified in the same way it would be if they were competitors or involved in illegal activities. This was pure theft, and theft is, by nature, selfish and detrimental to society. Walt wasn't trading or creating value here. He was taking from others, making it one of the most clearly wrong actions he committed. It's funny, though, that many Breaking Bad analysts view these thefts as minor infractions compared to other things Walt did, but they are actually the most obviously wrong choices he made. Still, these moments were strategic decisions to keep his operation afloat, and in the grand scheme of things, they're a far cry from what others accuse him of. 2. Sending his neighbor Becky into his house to check for assassins. This was another questionable decision. Becky, Walt's elderly neighbor, was innocent and completely uninvolved in the criminal world. By asking her to enter his house as a ruse to get her to check his house for potential assassins sent by Gus, Walt was putting her in harm's way, and she didn't consent to that risk. That said, Walt likely predicted that the hitmen employed by Gus wouldn't be so reckless as to kill an innocent old lady. They weren't that sloppy, and the fact that she came out unharmed shows that Walt was right in his calculation. And while it sounds harsh, Becky's life wasn't of major consequence in the world. As an old lady, she likely no longer contributed any meaningful value to anyone in her life. So while Walt's actions here weren't completely justifiable, it wasn't as morally wrong as people might think. And he was still acting in a calculated manner, with the likely outcome being that Becky would remain safe, and that's exactly what happened. 3. Killing Mike. This is one of the few moments in which Walter's actions feel more personal than calculated. Mike didn't need to die, and Walt's decision to shoot him was largely born out of the fact that Mike insulted him deeply. Killing someone over a personal slight isn't easy to defend. In that moment, Walt allowed his pride to get the better of him, which is arguably one of his weaker moments. However, even though the decision came from the wrong place, killing Mike may have still been the right choice for Walt's long-term survival. Mike was stubbornly refusing to do what needed to be done with Gus's former henchmen in jail. Mike wanted to pay them off, which was a half measure as opposed to the full measure of killing them.
I chose a half measure when I should have gone all the way.
And Walt could have reasonably feared that leaving Mike alive could become a major liability. Mike was going against his own code by refusing to take the necessary steps to silence the guys in prison. If Walt hadn't eliminated Mike, he could have become a threat later, especially since Walt was planning to take measures which Mike strongly disagreed with. Let's not forget, though, Walt immediately regretted killing Mike, which shows he wasn't a cold-blooded killer. His remorse proves that he had a heart and wasn't a sociopath. This wasn't a very calculated act. It was arguably a misstep born out of a moment of frustration. 4. Forcing his family into a risky life of crime. Perhaps Walt's biggest moral failing was dragging his family into his dangerous criminal lifestyle without their consent. Skylar didn't marry Walt expecting to be part of the drug trade. By choosing to enter the criminal world, Walt indirectly put his family at risk. This is a significant moral issue, as Walt made life-altering decisions for them without their knowledge. But at the same time, Walt was the head of the household, and as the man of the family, he took on the responsibility of providing for and leading them. In many ways, Walt saw his decision to enter the meth business as a way of securing his family's future. He felt that, as the leader of the family, he had the authority to make big decisions about their welfare, even if they didn't fully understand the stakes. In Walt's eyes, he was taking the calculated risk on their behalf, and in a way, that's what many heads of families do. They take risks to ensure a better life for their loved ones. And to be frank, everything would have gone smoothly if it weren't for Jesse's constant screw-ups. Walt had calculated that his venture into the drug trade wasn't as risky as it appeared. Walter's downfall wasn't because of his own decisions, but because Jesse's negligence forced him into increasingly dangerous situations. Walt's family wouldn't have been in nearly as much danger if Jesse had just done his job and kept his head down. These few moments are the only real blots on Walt's otherwise justified actions. Yes, they were morally questionable, but even here, there's still some level of rationale behind them. These exceptions highlight the rare moments where Walt faltered, but they don't come close to defining him as the villain many people make him out to be. Chapter 7. Do other characters really act more morally than Walt? For some reason, it's easy for many people to paint Walter White as the villain of Breaking Bad and give a free pass to other characters. But when you dig deeper, you start to see that many of the people around him acted comparably, if not worse, than he ever did. Whether it's the scams pulled by Jimmy in Better Call Saul, Mike's ruthless enforcement of Gus's drug empire, or Hank's destructive quest to capture Walt, these characters are all guilty of actions that are morally equal to or worse than Walt's. Yet most viewers hold them to a much lower standard. Let's break down why these characters are not the moral high ground people make them out to be. 1. Jimmy's actions in Better Call Saul were way worse than anything Walt ever did. While Walt is constantly judged negatively for his actions in Breaking Bad, Jimmy McGill is often seen as a harmless, likable hero in his spin-off, Better Call Saul. But let's look at one of Jimmy's most immoral moments, the scam on Howard Hamlin in Season 6. This wasn't about survival or proving his worth. It was pure sadism. Jimmy and Kim targeted Howard, an innocent bystander, not even for any monetary reason, but only because they wanted to have fun manipulating and fooling someone for their own amusement. Howard wasn't in the criminal game. He was a regular guy trying to do his job. The humiliating, career-destroying scam they pulled on him was driven by petty desires to ruin his life just for kicks. Compare that to Walt's motives. Walt's actions, while extreme, were grounded in a desire to prove his greatness, to leave a legacy, and to make a lot of money in a legal vacuum, or purely out of necessity for his own survival. He wasn't targeting innocent bystanders for fun. He was serving an underserved market, providing a product people were willing to pay for. In many ways, Walt's ambition to build a business in an underserved market is much more respectable than Jimmy and Kim's cruel game of fraud for entertainment. Scamming people for personal fun is not respectable, and in this case, it even led to Howard's tragic death. What Jimmy did was far more selfish and pointless than anything Walter ever did. 2. Mike acted just as morally as Walt. Another character who often gets a free pass is Mike Ehrmantraut. Many fans see Mike as a tragic figure, someone who only did what he had to do for his family. But let's be honest, everything Mike did while working for Gus was on the same moral level as anything Walt did. Mike killed people, enforced Gus's violent empire, and played a key role in the drug trade. So why does Mike get a pass? While Walt is viewed as irredeemable, Mike understood the same thing Walt did. Some people in the game need to be taken out when they become a problem. Most of the time, the people Mike killed were reckless, irresponsible, or posed a threat to the business. Exactly the same justification Walt used for most of his kills. Walt was just as pragmatic as Mike when it came to eliminating threats, and yet people hold them to wildly different moral standards. Mike was loyal to Gus, a ruthless drug kingpin, while Walt was trying to build something for himself and his family. When you look at their actions side by side, it's clear. Mike did nothing wrong, just like Walt did nothing wrong. 3. Hank's sense of morality was far worse than Walt's. Hank is often seen as the noble cop trying to bring down his criminal brother-in-law, but his actions are far from being morally clean. Hank's pursuit of Walt was fueled by ego and obsession, and in the process, he was willing to destroy his entire family just to make the arrest. Let's not forget, Walt was retired from the drug business by the time Hank found out, and he was dying of cancer. There was no longer any possibly imaginable immediate threat from Walt, yet Hank chose to blow the situation wide open just to satisfy his own need to win. Hank also operates as an agent of the state, enforcing anti-drug laws that are unjust and immoral. Hank is upholding a system that punishes people for engaging in voluntary transactions. Hank's choices here directly led to the deaths of multiple people, including himself. He was reckless in how he handled the investigation, refusing to inform the larger DEA, choosing instead to keep things secret so he could take Walt down personally. This recklessness got people killed, and Hank's own life was the ultimate casualty. Even worse, Hank stated he was willing to let Jesse get killed in a sting operation with Walt, showing that he didn't care much for anyone's life as long as he got his win.
What if the kid's right? What if it's a trap?
The kid? Oh, you mean the junkie murderer that's dribbling all over my guest bathroom floor? Oh, then he's right. Pinkman gets killed. We get it all on tape.
Also, let's not forget, Hank was totally willing to pursue the case even though he knew Walt was dying. Would it have really hurt anyone to let Walt go in peace? Hank wasn't acting out of a sense of justice. He was driven by pride. In contrast, Walt truly cared about Hank and never wanted him to get hurt. Walt even was willing to give up everything he worked for in an attempt to save Hank when it came down to it, showing that he valued family far more than Hank ever did.
Sorry, man. Just no scenario where this guy lives.
No, listen! I have money! I have money! It's buried out here. It's $80 million.
When we take a closer look at these characters, it's clear that Walt's actions were no worse, and in many cases, far more justifiable, than the actions of others. Jimmy scammed an innocent man for fun, Mike killed people for Gus's empire, and Hank was willing to destroy his own family just to satisfy his own ego. Yet, Walt is the one painted as evil. In reality, when you put these characters side by side, Walt's actions are far more understandable and admirable than those of his so-called moral superiors. Chapter 8. Deep down, everyone was rooting for Walt. Let's be honest, most people, especially the normies, who watched Breaking Bad, were rooting for Walter White. From the very beginning, audiences were drawn to Walt's journey, empathizing with him as he transformed from a mild-mannered high school teacher into a drug kingpin. People felt a deep connection to Walt's struggle for power and his desire to provide for his family. And for the vast majority of viewers, this connection never really went away. Even when Walt made extreme choices, there was always that underlying sense of understanding. The truth is, most people saw themselves in Walt, or at the very least, wished they had the guts to do what he did. The notion that Walt was actually a villain only really takes hold when people start to overthink things. They get caught up in dissecting every decision Walt makes, analyzing it through an exaggerated moral lens. Or more commonly, they are corrupted by the YouTube analyzers who love to paint Walt as pure evil. But here's the thing. These viewers had the right instinct the first time. When they watched the show and experienced it without all the external noise, they empathized with Walt and saw his actions as completely understandable, even necessary. People who overanalyze Breaking Bad tend to fall into the trap of trying to appear morally superior by denouncing Walt. They latch onto extreme interpretations and exaggerations, blowing his actions out of proportion. It becomes like a meme or a bandwagon, where everyone jumps on board and repeats the same hyperbolic statements about how evil or disgusting or horrible Walt was. People today seem to see hating Walter White as sort of a trendy fashion signal that they hold the more sophisticated opinion of the show than all of the lower plebs. They're basically performing a dumb form of virtue signaling, being that they're so passionately denouncing a fictional character. For instance, listen to this moronic YouTuber talking about Walt's evolution as a character.
Around this point, Walter is not only getting more standoffish, morally grey and prideful, but he's also getting more and more brash and irrational. He can't stomach his being the employee under a man bigger than him. He just cannot stand the power dynamic. By this point, any semblance to the silent, cancer-ridden man White once was is now gone, and he's fully embraced the much darker elements of his personality. He now has no issue killing, give himself the ability to make the ultimate decision. He also seems to have little to no care for his family's well-being anymore.
This guy has just totally rewritten the show in his mind somehow. He somehow believes that Walt went after Gus all on his own accord out of jealousy. I guess this is how memes snowball and get out of control. These anti-Walt people create a feedback loop and amplify each other. Even the show's writers sometimes seem to push this narrative. At times, like in interviews about the show, they've reinforced the idea that Walt was the ultimate morally bankrupt villain. It's like they don't even fully grasp the larger meaning of what they themselves created. Breaking Bad resonated so deeply with viewers because it's not about a villain. It's about a man reclaiming his life and finding power in a world that had left him behind. That's the real story, and it's why so many people connected with Walt on such a visceral level. Deep down, the writers did understand the appeal of Walt. How do we know this? Just look at the final episode. The way the series wraps up is a testament to how much the writers felt that Walt deserved a happy ending. In the end, Walt doesn't die in disgrace or defeat. He succeeds completely, taking out his enemies, securing his legacy, and going out as an undeniable badass. The final scene is a power fantasy, giving viewers exactly what they wanted from Walt's journey. It's the perfect ending for a character who, at his core, was always meant to be seen as a hero in the eyes of the audience. Conclusion: Breaking Bad is about becoming stronger, not turning evil. Breaking Bad is often described as the story of a good man turning evil, but that interpretation misses the real heart of the show. At its core, Breaking Bad isn't about a man going through moral decline. It's about a man becoming less meek, less of a pushover, and more willing to do what needs to be done when extreme measures are called for. It's a story of empowerment, of someone who stops letting the world walk all over him and finally takes control of his own destiny. At the same time, Walt's journey is also about something deeper, his inherent need to be a caregiver and a father figure, especially to Jesse. Walt is a teacher at heart, someone who feels compelled to nurture and guide those around him. This isn't the behavior of a villain, but rather of someone who cares too much. Someone who sees potential in others and can't help but try to bring it out. Beyond that, Breaking Bad is about overcoming fear. It's about facing the things that terrify you and losing that fear in the pursuit of greatness.
I have spent my whole life scared. But you know what? Ever since my diagnosis, I sleep just fine. It's that fear that's the worst of it. That's the real enemy. So, get up. Get out in the real world. And you kick that bastard as hard as you can, right in the teeth.
In many ways, the themes of Breaking Bad mirror those of Fight Club. It's about shedding societal expectations, stepping into your true self, and doing whatever it takes to achieve your goals. And this is why Breaking Bad resonates so strongly with men, just like Fight Club does. Walter White's cancer diagnosis serves as a catalyst for his transformation, allowing him to shed all the constraints that had been holding him back for years. Much like in Fight Club, where losing all hope brings freedom, Walt's grim prognosis frees him from fear, societal expectations, and the limits he'd imposed on himself. Facing death, he no longer cares about playing it safe or staying within the lines.
Never give up control. Live life on your own terms. Every life comes with a death sentence. So every few months I come in here for my regular scan, knowing full well that one of these times I'm gonna hear some bad news.
Until then, who's in charge? Me.
Walt is, unambiguously, the hero of Breaking Bad. We should be inspired by his journey, by his relentless drive to overcome the odds and achieve greatness. From a man beaten down by life, to someone who becomes a force to be reckoned with, Walt's transformation is what makes the show so appealing. We empathize with him as the underdog, and we cheer for him when he finally steps into his own power. Walt isn't an anti-hero. He's a regular hero, in every sense of the word. It's time for the overthinking analyzers to stop spreading these false narratives about Breaking Bad being a story of a man turning into a villain. It's not. It's the story of a man becoming the best, most powerful version of himself. Walt isn't someone to pity. He's someone to admire or celebrate. And his journey is one that deserves to be recognized for what it truly is. A tale of overcoming fear, rising to the challenge, and achieving greatness. To be completely frank, Breaking Bad is about a pussy becoming a badass.